Oh wow, right now it's like...
A fireball mushroom cloud over Pyatigorsk. The whole city shook from the massive explosion at the gas station. Retaliation for the shelling of Ukraine has already arrived. A major Russian chemical plant is on fire.
Guys, something's really up with the nitrogen, seriously.
The objective? Elimination. Right now, Russians are calculating the coordinates of the Ukrainian leadership for complete destruction. The Kremlin is divided. Putin is being pushed toward 20 years of war, while Gerasimov is rubbing his hands and preparing 2 waves of mobilization. Belarus will attack Ukraine. Putin has pressured Lukashenko into submission. Ukraine is preparing the defense of Kyiv and Chernihiv. The response will be powerful. Green light for Russia. Trump refuses to deploy troops to Poland. The path for the Russian army into NATO countries is officially open. The Russian offensive has been thwarted by the new tactics of the Ukrainian armed forces. Putin's commanders brutally finish off their own soldiers with drones when they try to surrender. Trump is abandoning Taiwan. The US president openly stated that he will not defend the island from China. Taipei responded harshly to this. Hello, my name is Yulia Kokan, and right now let's talk about the main news. But first, please like this video and subscribe to our channel so we don't lose each other on YouTube. And let's start with some very hot news. Russia is on fire again. This time Stavropol Krai is burning. On May 16th, an explosion occurred at a gas station in the Russian city of Pyatigorsk. A huge fireball rose above the city. According to local social media, the explosion happened during the unloading of a gas tanker. After that, a fire broke out, followed by an explosion. The preliminary cause was a violation of safety regulations. It is known that 2 people were injured in the explosion. The circumstances of the incident and the exact extent of the damage are being clarified. In any case, I don't see any downsides. Let's be honest, when Russia is burning and exploding, it's always a sight to see. While the Kremlin draws victorious arrows on their maps, our drones of Retribution are delivering devastating strikes deep behind enemy lines.
Guys, something's really up with Azot. Seriously guys, Azot is really getting hit.
On May 16th, in the Stavropol region, the chemical giant Azot plant in the city of Nevinomaisk caught fire. This is one of the largest chemical enterprises in the region, which directly supplies components to the Russian defense industry.
Basically, they missed the mark and it got hit. And that is all there is to it.
By the way, this is already the 6th attack on this plant. The day before, our drones also delivered a powerful strike on the Ryazan oil refinery, one of the largest in Russia. The Telegram channel Kremlin Tabakerka writes that the Russian oil and gas industry continues to suffer as a result of systematic Ukrainian attacks. The actual losses of the largest companies are only increasing day by day. According to sources, high-ranking Russian military officials are now almost manually deciding which facilities to protect today and which to leave completely unguarded. More details about the Ukrainian sanctions strikes in the report.
Ukrainian drones of Retribution took to the skies in response to the monstrous shelling of peaceful Ukrainian cities on May 13th and 14th, during which the Kremlin deployed nearly 900 UAVs. The Ukrainian armed forces launched a special operation in Russian airspace and in temporarily occupied territories. During the night of May 15th, SPS drones carried out 55 strikes on 23 military targets and facilities deep within enemy territory. Taganrog, Yeysk, the temporarily occupied territory of Crimea, as well as the Donetsk, Zaporizhzhia and Luhansk regions, including Berdyansk, Melitopol, and so on. In the Russian city of Yeysk, local telegram channels are reporting a fire in the area of the airfield. Air defense systems were actively operating there throughout the night.
There it is, there it is, there it is.
However, all the efforts of the Russian air defense proved futile. Despite the intense barrage, Ukrainian drones from the unmanned systems forces reached their targets. Their spoils included a unique B-200 amphibious aircraft and a Ka-27 helicopter in Yeysk, as well as additional air defense systems. By Friday morning, the enemy had lost a Torum 2 air defense system in the Luhansk region, a Panzer S-1 in Crimea, and yet another cargo ship carrying ammunition in Berdyansk, Zaporizhzhia region. Taganrog's air defense was also very active on Thursday night into Friday. The local residents, so as not to attract Ukrainian drones, have even started speaking in whispers. Bryansk isn't sleeping either. Ukrainian drones are also operating in the skies there. However, this time, Ryazan suffered the most, even though it's almost 1,000 kilometers from Kyiv.
I wake up, it's 4 in the morning. I look out the window and I just see it. Just smoke, something is burning. And there was an explosion before that.
Honestly, I don't even know what to tell you. Sorry for the language, but this is fucked up.
Ukrainian drones of Retribution struck the Rosneft oil refinery, one of the largest in Russia.
Damn, just check this shit out. It's all smoke from the oil refinery. It's all going over there, basically.
According to local authorities, a fire broke out at the facility. However, Russian officials haven't said a word about the scale of it. Meanwhile, local inhabitants of the surrounding city could distinctly observe with their own eyes at least 4 separate sources of fire, including 2 massive burning vacuum oil processing units, which inevitably means the refinery will be forced to shut down for an exceptionally extended period of time, if it is even able to resume operations at all.
They're flying over there. No, over there. They're flying over there. There. Do you see? Damn, that's it. Then you can't see it, damn it. Nothing at all. Over there, look. Why aren't they shooting them down?
Incidentally, more and more Russians are asking the same question. Where is the much-vaunted Putin air defense, and why isn't it protecting important sites from Ukrainian drone attacks? And the answer is very simple. Instead of providing protection, they themselves are terrorizing their own citizens. So right at the very start of the attack, Russian air defense troops fired directly at a residential building in the middle of Ryazan.
Damn it, people! Fuck! Fuck.
In the video, you can clearly hear that it's not a drone. It's as if the Russian air defense system deliberately struck the apartment building. But that was only the beginning. Next, the clumsy operators of electronic warfare systems got involved. They managed to throw one of the Ukrainian drones off course and directed it straight into Ryazan's main symbol of unity, the so-called tricolor, an apartment building painted in the colors of the Russian flag.
Poor people, poor people.
You couldn't come up with a better anti-advertisement for Russian electronic warfare. The multi-story tricolor building can be seen from almost anywhere in the city, and especially when plumes of smoke are rising above it.
People are all leaving. Unbelievable.
Following the residents of the damaged apartment building, all the other inhabitants started leaving the city as well. Ryazan seems to be repeating the fate of Tuapse. Their oil rain has already started to fall, and it's simply impossible to breathe on the streets. Everyone who can't evacuate from the city is sealing their windows and doors tightly and watching in horror as the black cloud spreads over the city. Meanwhile, the local authorities are only asking people not to panic, or at least not to spread panic on the not yet blocked internet. And the Russian Ministry of Defense merely stated that Russian air defense forces shot down 355 Ukrainian drones overnight, conveniently forgetting to mention that they hit their own residential buildings.
Reading the comments on the previous episodes, I see that many of you are watching us from Europe, Kazakhstan, Moldova, and even the USA. We, Ukrainians, are grateful for your support and proud to have such sensible viewers. Let us know in the comments below which country you're watching us from and whether people there support our fight against the empire of evil. I always enjoy reading your comments, and in the meantime, we're moving on to the most interesting part. The threat from Belarus has not disappeared. Putin continues to try to drag Lukashenko fully into the war. According to President Volodymyr Zelensky, the Kremlin held additional talks about this with the Belarusian dictator the day before. The Kremlin regime plans to use Belarus in an operation in the Chernihiv-Kyiv direction or against one of the NATO countries.
Of course, we will continue to defend Ukraine, to protect our people, Ukrainians. I have instructed our defense and security forces of Ukraine to prepare a response plan, and at the staff meeting, we will review and approve it. We will strengthen the Chernihiv-Kyiv direction. Our partners also know what is happening and what Belarus is being pushed toward.
And now, against the backdrop of Russia's growing activity in Belarus, it seems that America is opening up more and more opportunities for Putin. Donald Trump is withdrawing troops from Europe. A few days ago, Washington canceled the deployment of 4,000 troops to Poland. The media reports that even the Pentagon was surprised by this decision.
The United States of America has postponed the deployment to Poland of the 2nd Armored Brigade of the 1st Cavalry Division, which was supposed to arrive there as part of a scheduled troop rotation. It is noted that this decision was made by the United States Department of Defense in accordance with President Donald Trump's plan to reduce the military presence in Europe. However, it caught some military officials off guard.
Moreover, the US is withdrawing part of its contingent from Germany, which is responsible for the deployment of long-range missiles. Currently, we're talking about 5,000 troops, but Trump has already stated that the final number will be higher. But let's get back to the Russians' plans. In addition to the Belarusian card, the Kremlin also plans to play the card of striking decision-making centers in Kyiv. What Putin and his henchmen have been talking about is not just a scare tactic, but a very real plan.
Well, as for these red lines, if you would be so kind as to permit me, I'll maintain a certain level of confidentiality regarding that specific matter, because on our part, it would mean taking some extremely rigorous and decisive countermeasures, specifically against those various decision-making centers that I have already mentioned, and that you yourself have just referred to.
The main intelligence directorate has obtained documents indicating preparations for a series of strikes on so-called decision-making centers, including dozens of political centers and military posts. In particular, the list of Russian targets includes the presidential administration, the state residence, and even the bunker for the president's office.
Strikes on Kyiv and our other cities, on political and military sites where the leadership of the army, the government, and here on Bankova Street may be located. They have had this plan developed for a long time. Now, after Iran, they have become more active again. They are searching for where we are located. The same applies to other representatives of the Ukrainian intelligence leadership and our special services. Some people there in Moscow did not understand that Ukrainians will never give up their independence. And in any case, whether on Bankova Street or not, we will not give up our land, our sovereignty, our state.
The picture is looking far from optimistic. And what do you think? Which point of the plan will the Russian Federation start implementing first? Strikes on Bankova or an offensive against Kyiv? And if it's an offensive, will it be from Belarus into Ukraine or into one of the NATO countries? Write your thoughts. And now to the news from the front. Thanks to a new tactic, Ukraine has stopped the occupiers' advance. This was reported by the Washington Times. As the publication notes, one of the main factors was the active use of drones and modern combat technologies. Yes, the front is still under heavy pressure. However, the situation no longer appears as critical as it did during the exhausting winter battles. And a few words about Russian fakes. Despite the occupiers' claims of capturing the village of Mala Karchakivka in the Sumy region, it remains under the control of Ukrainian paratroopers and other units. This was stated by the 71st Separate Mechanized Brigade. More about the situation at the front, particularly at the Uspenksy bridgehead in the Zaporizhzhia direction, is shared by a Ukrainian soldier with the call sign Muchnoi. According to him, in this sector, our fighters from the 82nd Air Assault Brigade's Wild Division unit carried out precise and concentrated strikes on enemy concentrations. At the same time, our forces also targeted a number of buildings in the sector where the enemy was hiding infantry, storing ammunition, and preparing for further raids and attempts to infiltrate our positions.
The enemy tried to disperse their personnel among shelters and buildings to make detection more difficult. However, aerial reconnaissance and the pilots worked flawlessly. Some of the shelters were dismantled right during the preparations for assault operations. Overall, the enemy continues to operate in small groups, amassing forces closer to the line of contact, but regular strikes on their concentration points prevent them from calmly forming a strike force. Our units are keeping the situation under control and methodically taking out the pigs who are trying to gain a foothold or prepare for a breakthrough.
According to the serviceman, the situation also remains difficult in the Alexandrovsk direction of the Dnipropetrovsk region. The enemy has started to sweep our rear more actively with airstrikes.
Bomber aviation of the 11th Guards Army of the Russian Air Force carried out strikes on the settlement of Chaplin. The enemy is clearly checking larger settlements for concentrations of personnel, ammunition, supply points, equipment, and logistics hubs. This is already an attempt to identify weak points in our rear structure and to create constant pressure even beyond the immediate line of combat engagement. The enemy is trying to operate not only along the front line, but also to disrupt logistics in order to complicate rotations, ammunition supply, and evacuation. If such strikes become systematic, we will have to change our approaches to camouflage, concentration, and movement in the frontline zone.
In addition to the aviation component, the enemy has increased the use of FPV drones against our light vehicles closer to the line of contact. The main focus is on targeting pickups, vans, ATVs, or any mobile logistics operating between positions. The enemy is trying to paralyze small-scale maneuverable deliveries and force personnel to move more slowly and cautiously. Essentially, they are now combining deep airstrikes with constant FPV pressure in the tactical zone to simultaneously hit both the rear and the frontline supply. And another thing about who the Russians are. The enemy eliminated 2 of their own servicemen who decided to lay down their arms and surrender. The war crime was recorded by a drone from the Pegasus unit of the 1st Separate Heavy Mechanized Brigade. And a couple more words about something positive. Footage has appeared online showing drones from the Steel Border Brigade entering Russian airspace. In the Kursk and Severoslobodsk directions, operators from the brigade destroyed 2 shelters. They also hit 2 vehicles, an antenna, and an enemy quad bike. Epic footage follows. I never cease to admire the courage and heroism of Ukrainian soldiers. They hold the front and stand against a huge horde that vastly outnumbers them. That's why I urge you to support the armed forces of Ukraine, and if you can't do so financially, write them words of encouragement in the comments. I know they're watching us. As the saying goes, they kept swimming and swimming, but when they reached the shore, well, you know the rest. Well, that's about the Russians. According to the Telegram channel Kremlin Snuffbox, there is a split in Putin's inner circle because of the so-called special military operation. Yes, you heard that right. A split because of the so-called special military operation. At the same time, the head of the Russian General Staff, Valery Gerasimov, is pleased and is expecting 2 waves of mobilization this year. According to several Kremlin sources, Putin's associates are increasingly divided over whether to continue this special military operation for many more years or to end it in the near future. Supporters of continuing the hostilities are convinced that Russia should fight for 10, even 20 years if necessary. And they claim that Putin thinks the same way.
Vladimir Vladimirovich has spoken about positive trends in the economy, which means we are ready to keep fighting for a long time. We will prepare society for the fact that the special military operation may continue for at least another 5 to 10 years, and everything will be fine, noted our source in the Kremlin, who belongs to such supporters.
At the same time, there are also influential people who advocate for a swift end to the hostilities. Many military personnel do not know what will happen next.
Some confirm what we have written about. Many soldiers are tired and hope for demobilization in the coming months. Morale is negatively affected by the situation at the front, where there is no significant progress and the losses are very substantial, which is due to the current nature of the fighting. Others are expecting mobilization. For example, in recent days, Valery Gerasimov has been in a cheerful mood and is telling his associates that there will be 2 waves of mobilization this year. The first of them will most likely be this summer.
And what do you think? What will Putin choose? Write a 1 in the comments if you think Russia will keep fighting for another 10 years, or a 2 if you're sure that the Russian dictator will still look for ways to end the war he started as soon as possible. While Russia is betting on sheer numbers, Ukraine is changing the very principle of warfare. Drones that are already striking hundreds of thousands of targets, deep strikes, the destruction of air defenses, and a system that even the enemy is now trying to copy. An overview of the key statements by Robert Brovdi, known as Magyar, the commander of the Unmanned Systems Forces, about how Ukraine is building the army of the future right in the midst of war. Today, Ukraine's Unmanned Systems Forces are no longer just supporting the infantry. It is a separate structure that is gradually changing the very principle of warfare. Robert Brovdi, better known as Magyar, has effectively demonstrated how Ukraine is building a new military system right in the midst of war.
Our task is to take out enemy pilots. Our task is to restrict logistics and movement beyond our awareness, the movement of personnel, the preparation of assaults, and to limit evacuations.
Numbers that until recently seemed like science fiction are now becoming the new reality at the front.
More than 300,000 targets hit since the formation of the group in 11 months. This is also very transparent information. I'll say the main thing, the average depth at which enemy personnel are destroyed today does not exceed 1,500 meters from the front line. Essentially, we are working right under their feet.
And the new objective is to achieve the stable elimination of up to 12,000 Russian soldiers every month.
Right now, it is precisely the use of unmanned aerial vehicles that is becoming the main component of the successful actions of Ukraine's defense forces. This makes it possible to neutralize the occupiers' advantage in manpower, heavy armored vehicles, and strike capabilities.
At the same time, Magyar is not just talking about the number of drones. The main focus is on systematization. The forces of unmanned systems are already being integrated into Army Corps to quickly reinforce the most difficult sections of the front and operate at operational depth.
Representatives of unmanned systems forces have already been deployed in more than half of the Corps. The first priority is to close the gaps where it is critical. The second is facilitating and assisting with the integration of mission control so that all units electronically record every flight mission that took place on the battlefield.
A separate indicator that highlights the effectiveness of the system is the level of confirmed strikes. In the unmanned systems forces, it exceeds 99%.
If necessary, the pilot is required to conduct additional reconnaissance and obtain further information confirming the destruction. That is why the percentage of confirmed strikes by the unit exceeds 99%. In the 414th Brigade, the rate of discrepancies is less than 1%. There was a month when the discrepancy rate was as low as 0.2%.
Another critical factor, the depth of the strikes. Today, the effective strike range of Ukrainian drones in many directions is setting records.
It is precisely this distance that forms the so-called gray zone, which is now fashionably referred to as the kill zone. As of today, I estimate it to be 25 kilometers or more in different areas.
Russia maintains a high number of troops at the front, but at the same time, the pace of mobilization is not significantly increasing.
It seems to me that since he hasn't carried out mobilization measures and still hasn't declared a full-scale war, he won't dare to do so before autumn. He will work with the contingent he currently has, and that's over 700,000 people along the front line.
At the same time, Ukraine is focusing not on quantity, but on the effectiveness of each element of the system. In the drone forces, they even establish clear indicators of effectiveness.
A single drone brigade destroys the infantry of 2 mechanized infantry brigades every month throughout the year. Then the next benchmark was set for the group to destroy the assault force of 1 enemy battalion every day.
Strangely enough, Russia is now trying to copy the Ukrainian drone force system.
They are essentially copying the existing franchise model of the drone force grouping. So in fact, they do have some experience in certain areas, but in most cases they try to steal something from us, tweak it, and then follow an already proven path.
After drones became one of the key factors in this war, the Russian army began restructuring its own units.
The positive experience of the Ukrainian side, such as slowing the pace of enemy advances directly on the front line, as well as the successful use of drones to destroy aerodynamic weapons, is being taken into account and accordingly scaled up by the occupying country's army.
Another important element that Magyar mentions, strikes against air defense systems. According to him, since the beginning of the year, 134 enemy air defense assets have already been destroyed.
This is a vivid example of carving out a corridor for the unhindered movement and achievement of objectives by a large number of assets at significant operational depth.
Ukraine continues to develop and strengthen its drone forces, increasing both the depth and effectiveness of its strikes. Even more powerful deep strikes lie ahead, along with further changes to the situation at the front.
Military targets, defense industry facilities, and fuel and energy infrastructure have been, are, and will remain priorities. Accordingly, these are legitimate military targets, and they should be set ablaze across the entire territory of the occupying country as a priority.
And now a bit of good news. Hungary will transfer to Ukraine the severance payments of the ministers from Viktor Orbán's government who have resigned over the weekend. The money will be sent to an orphanage in the village of Velika Dobron in Zakarpattia. This was announced by Hungary's new Prime Minister, Péter Magyar. He warned the ministers who ruined Hungary and drove it into debt not to even think about taking this money. According to him, given the state in which they left the country, this is the least they can do. Taking into account the deputies, the amount reaches between 2 and 8 million euros. And what do you think of such a gesture from Hungary? Write your thoughts in the comments. I'll definitely read them. Now, this is some news. Donald Trump barely returned from China after meeting with Xi Jinping, and he's already giving interviews and making some truly unexpected statements. Just listen to this. According to the American president, the US will not defend Taiwan in the event of a war with China, and arms deliveries to the island have been suspended for now because they themselves want to start a war against China. In addition, Trump spoke out against Taiwan's independence and called on local chip manufacturers to move production to the US. An official response from Taipei immediately followed Trump's loud statements.
Taiwan is an independent, sovereign, democratic state and is not under China's control.
Let me remind you, China considers Taiwan its territory and has long opposed US arms sales to the island, which according to Beijing constitutes interference in the country's internal affairs. The United States, despite lacking official diplomatic relations with Taiwan, remains Taiwan's most important international supporter and its largest arms supplier. Soon after Trump, Putin also began preparing to visit the Middle Kingdom. The Kremlin officially confirmed the Tsar's visit to China for May 19th through 20th. The press service reported that Putin will discuss bilateral relations with Xi Jinping and exchange views on major international and regional issues. Following the talks, it is planned to sign a joint statement by the leaders of the countries and a number of other documents. And what do you think about all this? Share your opinion in the comments. Putin dismissed 2 border governors of Belgorod and Bryansk, appointing in their place a military butcher responsible for atrocities against Ukrainian prisoners of war and a bureaucrat from the so-called LNR, who has ingratiated himself with the Kremlin. The Kremlin snuffbox reports insider information that the appointment of Yevgeny Savchenko as advisor to the new governor of Belgorod Oblast, Igor Shuvayev, will have several key consequences at once. First, Savchenko is supposed to keep an eye on Shuvayev himself, to make sure he doesn't mess things up. Anonymous sources also point out that Shuvayev has problems with alcohol, but that's not his biggest issue. Secondly, Savchenko promises to purge the region of Gladkov's people. And in this case, dismissals alone won't be enough. In Belgorod, investigations into large-scale embezzlement organized by Gladkov's associates are already expected. The new governor has been tasked with ensuring that it is possible to live in the city during the winter, so that there is no need to call for evacuation as was done last winter. However, actually making this possible is extremely difficult if Ukraine continues to strike critical infrastructure. In any case, none of the experts we interviewed gave a positive forecast. The situation could be improved by saturating the region with air defense systems, but those are also in short supply. Hang in there, Russians. The new Putin elite is coming.
He became the governor of Belgorod Oblast back in the fall of 2020. And since the start of the so-called special military operation, his popularity as the head of a frontline region rose sharply. On May 14th, Vyacheslav Gladkov left the post of governor.
The decision has been made. He left the post of governor of Belgorod Oblast. I wanted to sincerely thank our president, the president of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin.
His term was supposed to end in September 2026, but Gladkov left his post 4 months early. Russian media reported that the reason for his early departure was his health condition, as well as fatigue from the intense work schedule. But it seems this is nothing more than a smokescreen.
Vyacheslav Gladkov does not have health problems, but Vyacheslav Gladkov does have problems because a large number of his deputies are in pretrial detention on corruption charges. And from my own personal perspective on the matter, Vyacheslav Gladkov is actively attempting to avoid suffering a similar fate as theirs in order to demonstrate clearly to his former subordinates that a completely new life and a fresh stage of development has finally begun.
By stepping down, Gladkov signaled to the Kremlin that he is asking for forgiveness for the corruption scandals and wants to avoid criminal prosecution. Putin appointed General Alexander Shuvayev as governor of the frontline region. The military man participated in the Russo-Georgian War, in the military operation in Syria, and also became a hero of the so-called Special Military Operation, SMO. He commanded the 1st Rifle Brigade of the DPR, which is accused of executing Ukrainian armed forces soldiers who had surrendered. Last summer, Shuvayev took part in the Time of Heroes program, within which military personnel are prepared for government service. And in January, he was appointed deputy governor of the Irkutsk region. Independent sources reported that Shuvayev's appointment was delayed for a long time because the military man simply got drunk before meeting with Putin. But despite this, for the Kremlin's security bloc, Shuvayev is the ideal candidate.
He's a person with military experience, someone who has been to war in Ukraine, someone who well, let's say, won't interfere with any restrictions related to the internet, various kinds of blockings and so on. He is absolutely a person who possesses the mindset and strategic thinking of the FSB, someone who, so to speak, will actively participate in neutralizing and shooting down drones, for example, which is quite unlike some other typical civilian administrative governor rather than a military one.
Putin also dismissed the governor of the Bryansk region, Alexander Bogomaz. The reason: the Kremlin blamed the official for its own inability to properly respond to the ongoing cross-border raids by the Ukrainian armed forces. Instead of Bogomaz, Putin temporarily appointed Yegor Kovalchuk as acting head of the region, who previously headed the government of the Luhansk People's Republic in the occupied part of Luhansk.
According to Kommersant, Bogomaz is now being offered a seat in the State Duma, while the former deputy governor of the Chelyabinsk region and ex-premier of the annexed Luhansk People's Republic, Yegor Kovalchuk, has agreed to take his place in the administration of the frontline region. A source close to the presidential administration, a political strategist working with the Kremlin, believes that Kovalchuk, given his experience in the annexed Luhansk region, was satisfied with the offer. The political strategist adds, it's better to be the governor of a frontline region than the prime minister of an annexed territory. The publication Meduza.
The replacement of Gladkov and Bogomaz, as well as the earlier removal of the governor of Kursk region, Smirnov, who was arrested for large-scale embezzlement, marks a change in leadership in all three Russian frontline regions. Corrupt officials are being replaced by military men who will not be overly concerned about the fate of ordinary Russians. And with these actions, the Kremlin is showing that they definitely do not plan to end the war.
One in 5 Russians considers mass protests in the country possible due to the decline in living standards. The share of Russian citizens who consider mass protests possible in connection with the decline in living standards in the country has reached 20%. Another 14% of respondents consider protests with political demands possible. These are the results of a study by the Levada Center. Both indicators have reached their highest level since July 24th. Here are the details.
Russia is on the brink of revolt. According to research by the Levada Center, 1 in 5 Russians is willing to protest against the decline in living standards.
Willingness is one thing, but reality is another. Yes, indeed, the situation inside Russia is so bad that people already understand that it is necessary to end the war. And they realize that the longer the war continues, the worse their economic situation becomes, and the worse their political situation gets.
Thus, 20% of Russians are ready to stand up for an improvement in their standard of living. This figure has reached a record high over the past 2 years.
So to speak, it's the same thing, the slaughter of livestock, the same cows. This is more of an economic issue than a political one. Well, of course, decisions are still made politically, but restricting the internet is more of a political issue than an economic one. So, although there is also an economic aspect to restricting the internet because it hits small businesses.
Another 14% of Russian citizens are ready to make political demands.
Moreover, the majority of citizens directly associate the worsening situation with Putin's personal stance. And gradually, people's willingness to participate in protests is starting to grow. What's surprising is that the willingness to participate in political protests is growing even more than in economic ones.
Nevertheless, at the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, protest sentiment was even higher.
They are killing innocent Ukrainians who are our own brothers.
In February 2022, 29% of Russians considered mass protests possible and 23% were ready to participate in economic actions, while 18% were willing to join political ones.
Some among Putin's supporters were counting on quick results, quick positives. Some people thought that this seizure of foreign lands was a positive result, while others just wanted to indulge their imperial pride. Yes, like now we'll take Kyiv, look how great we are. But none of that happened. That is to say, absolutely no one was capable of experiencing the same kind of intense euphoria that followed the annexation of Crimea. And at the same time, on one hand, there are ongoing Ukrainian military strikes on Russian territory, meaning the reality of the war has finally reached the heart of Russia itself. And on the other hand, there is a severe and widespread economic collapse occurring simultaneously.
The rise in protest sentiment is linked to a decline in support for the authorities. The approval rating of the Kremlin dictator Putin is currently at its lowest since the start of the full-scale invasion, standing at 65.5%. Things are even worse for Putin's United Russia. Their support currently stands at only 28%.
That's all for now. Please like this video and don't forget to subscribe to our channel Ukraine Today so you don't miss future episodes. See you next time.